Hi everyone, my name is Princess Ngoko. Today I'll be presenting on the food system, how food is produced, how it moves through society, and how it impacts both the environment and people. My goal is to show how the food system affects all of us, from the land we grow food on to the communities who struggle to access healthy meals. Food system overview. The food system is shaped by industrial agriculture, monoculture farming, overfishing, chemical fertilizers, pesticides, and global supply chains. These practices damage soil, water, air, and biodiversity by stripping nutrients from farmland, polluting rivers and oceans, releasing greenhouse gases, and contributing to deforestation and ocean dead zones. They also affect marine ecosystems through overfishing and harmful fishing methods that reduce fish populations and kill unintended species. As a result, people experience food insecurity, chemical exposure, rising food prices, unequal access, and labor exploitation, especially in communities already facing social and economic inequality. We can improve the system through regenerative agriculture, sustainable fishing, reducing waste, protecting pollinators, fair labor practices, and expanding food access. For slide 3 and 4, we will be talking about the key subtopics and core problems as we go through each of them. So, for global food supply chains, food travels long distances through international trade and corporate networks. The problem is that long supply chains increase pollution, exploit workers, and make countries dependent on global markets. Industrial agriculture. Industrial agriculture uses chemicals, machines, and huge monoculture fields to produce food quickly and cheaply. But this system damages soil, water, and air, and it creates social inequality because profit is prioritized over people and ecosystems. Food insecurity. Food insecurity happens when people cannot access healthy, affordable food due to poverty, location, or social barriers. Millions of people struggle to get nutritious food, leading to hunger, poor health, and long-term inequality. Labor in the food system. Farm workers, meatpacking workers, and food service workers often face dangerous, low-paid jobs. They're exposed to chemicals, injuries, and unsafe conditions, showing how the food system relies on exploited labor. Food waste. Food waste happens at farms, stores, restaurants, and homes. When food is thrown away, it increases pollution, wastes resources, and worsens hunger, even though the food could have fed people. Food deserts or food apartheid. Food deserts are areas where people cannot access fresh, healthy food because of structural racism, poverty, and lack of grocery stores. This forces communities to rely on fast food and processed foods, increasing disease and widening health gaps. But reliance on markets is often underfunded and overshadowed by industrial agriculture. As we go the last slide further, we enter climate change and agriculture. Agriculture contributes to climate change, and climate change harms agriculture. Extreme weather, drought, and heat reduce crop yields and threaten global food security. Sustainable agriculture. Sustainable agriculture protects soil, water, biodiversity, and long-term food security. But these methods are often underfunded and overshadowed by industrial agriculture. Corporate power in food. A few large companies control seeds, fertilizers, meatpacking, and grocery stores. Corporations shape what food is available, how much it costs, and how it is produced, often harming people and the planet. Cultural food practices. Food traditions reflect identity, migration, and community. But industrial food systems threaten cultural food traditions and replace them with processed, standardized foods. Environmental impacts of meat production. Meat production uses huge amounts of land, water, and energy. It increases emissions, deforestation, water pollution, and antibiotic resistance. Local and alternative food systems. Local systems like farmers markets, gardens, and co-ops support communities and sustainability, but they often lack funding and face competition from large corporations. In this slide, we talk about state-level causes and contributions, focusing on how government decisions, investments, and policies shape the food system. At the state level, investment patterns often worsen food system harm. States frequently fund industrial meat production, support corporate seed monopolies, and invest in large-scale monocropping of crops like corn and soy. They also expand global shipping and logistics systems that increase emissions and environmental pressure. In many cases, profit motives outweigh ecological concerns, leading states to prioritize economic growth over sustainability. Policies play a major role as well. Farm bill subsidies often reward industrial agriculture instead of supporting small farmers or regenerative practices. Programs like SNAP and school lunches influence what food communities can access, while water quality regulations and land use zoning determine how farms operate and how much pollution enters rivers and lakes. Trade agreements can encourage large-scale exports and imports, reinforcing industrial farming rather than local food systems. These policies can either support sustainability or reinforce environmental destruction, depending on how they are designed and enforced. States contribute to food system harm by subsidizing industrial agriculture, allowing unsustainable water use, and maintaining weak regulation of pesticides. Many states also support large meat corporations through tax breaks and infrastructure funding, which strengthens corporate control and increases pollution from livestock operations. Minnesota shows clear examples of these issues. The state's food system is dominated by heavy corn and soybean monoculture, which reduces biodiversity and increases pesticide and fertilizer use. Fertilizer runoff flows into rivers and lakes, harming water quality and contributing to algae blooms. Dairy and hog farming create pollution through manure runoff and methane emissions, affecting rural communities and ecosystems. Many rural areas in Minnesota face food deserts, where families must travel long distances to find fresh food. At the same time, Minnesota is actively debating sustainable agriculture, water protection, and land use reforms, showing that the state is trying to balance industrial farming with environmental responsibility. Together, these state-level factors reveal how government decisions influence ecological conditions, rural community well-being, and the future of the food system. Now we talk about corporate causes and contributions. Corporations play a major role in shaping the food system because they control essential parts of food production, like seeds, fertilizers, and pesticides, which forces farmers to depend on them year after year. They promote cheap, processed foods that harm public health, especially in low-income communities, and they spend millions lobbying against environmental regulations so they can continue using harmful chemicals and expand factory farms without restrictions. Corporations also exploit food system workers, from farm workers to meatpacking employees, by paying low wages and exposing them to unsafe conditions. On top of that, they control grocery access and food prices, deciding what food people can buy and how much it costs. Their decisions focus on profit, not sustainability, which increases pollution, soil degradation, climate impacts, and social inequality throughout the food system. Going on, we talk about individual causes and contributions, and how everyday choices also shape the food system. High meat consumption increases demand for livestock farming, which uses huge amounts of land and water, and releases methane, a powerful greenhouse gas. Food waste is another major issue, because when we throw away food at home, it ends up in landfills, where it produces methane and wastes all the resources used to grow it. Our demand for cheap convenience foods encourages companies to rely on industrial agriculture, chemical additives, and long supply chains that pollute the environment and limit access to fresh food. And the overuse of packaged goods, especially plastic, adds to landfill waste and ocean pollution. These individual choices may seem small, but together they contribute to environmental harm and reinforce the problems in the food system. On this, we are introduced to current event: climate-driven droughts. Right now, extreme heat and long periods without rain are reducing crop yields in major farming regions like the US, Brazil, and East Africa. When crops fail or produce less food, global supply drops and prices rise, making basic foods like rice, wheat, and corn more expensive around the world. These droughts also affect livestock farmers and local food markets, creating shortages that spread through global supply chains. Low-income families are impacted the most because they already struggle to afford healthy food, and rising prices make nutritious options even harder to access. This shows how environmental issues quickly become social issues, increasing hunger, poverty, and inequality for the communities least able to recover. We talk about some additional causes and systemic contributions. Global trade, transportation emissions, packaging waste, and restaurant and retail food waste all add pressure to the food system. Because of this, natural processes like soil formation, water cycles, pollination, and ocean nutrient cycles are disrupted by chemical-intensive farming, GMOs, and antibiotic overuse. Going through this section, we come across agriculture's role in today's extinction event. Modern agriculture is one of the biggest drivers of species loss because it transforms entire ecosystems through habitat destruction, overfishing, pesticide use, soil degradation, and climate impacts. Forests, grasslands, and wetlands are cleared to make room for monocrop fields and livestock operations, destroying the natural habitats that plants, animals, and fungi depend on. Overfishing empties oceans and collapses fish populations, disrupting marine food webs and threatening coastal communities. Pesticides and chemical fertilizers poison pollinators, insects, birds, and soil organisms, weakening biodiversity from the ground up. Soil degradation from intensive farming reduces organic matter and kills the microorganisms that support healthy ecosystems. Agriculture also contributes heavily to climate change through methane emissions, deforestation, and fossil fuel-powered machinery, creating hotter, drier conditions that many species cannot survive. All of these pressures push countless species toward extinction, and they also reduce the ability of farms to grow food. As ecosystems collapse, pollinators decline, soil becomes less fertile, and water sources dry up, leading to lower crop yields and making food production more unstable. This shows how environmental destruction caused by agriculture doesn't just harm wildlife, it also threatens the future of our food system. For this slide, we also talk about the ecosystem impacts and how the food system touches every part of the biosphere. Stuff like native plants are being replaced by monocrops, pollinators decline, fish populations collapse, and soil fungi are damaged by chemicals. These losses weaken ecosystems and reduce biodiversity. On this slide, I'm explaining how the food system affects the natural world, including plants, animals, and fungi. Flora is impacted when native plants are replaced by monocrops, reducing biodiversity and weakening ecosystems. Many plant species that depend on pollinators begin to decline as pollinator populations fall. Fauna is also affected, with fish populations collapsing from overfishing, pollinators dying from pesticides, and wildlife being displaced as forests are cleared for agriculture. Expanding farms also create livestock-wildlife conflict, pushing animals into competition for land and water. Fungi are impacted as well because soil chemicals disrupt fungal networks, deforestation destroys the forest environments fungi rely on, and reduced organic matter limits their ability to support healthy soil. Altogether, these changes show how the food system doesn't just affect people, it reshapes entire ecosystems and threatens the balance of life on Earth. On this slide, I'm explaining the main human activities that harm our food system. Industrial farming, overconsumption, waste, deforestation, and pollution all work together to damage the environment and create health risks for communities. Industrial farming weakens soil and biodiversity, while overconsumption pushes farms to expand and use more resources. This pushes farms to expand, clear more land, and use more water and energy. Food waste increases methane emissions and wastes the resources used to grow food. Deforestation destroys habitats and accelerates climate change. This destroys habitats, accelerates climate change, and harms indigenous communities. And pollution from chemicals and factory farms harms both people and ecosystems. The key idea is that our actions directly shape the health of the food system and the environment. Other impacts of the food system include the serious effects it has on human health. The food system affects health through chemical exposure, contaminated water, foodborne illness, and poor nutrition. Communities near farms and factory operations face toxic runoff from pesticides and fertilizers, which can contaminate drinking water with bacteria and harmful chemicals, creating long-term health risks for families. People are also exposed to chemicals through processed foods and agricultural sprays, which can contribute to chronic illnesses over time. Foodborne illness increases when food is grown, processed, or handled unsafely, especially in large industrial systems where contamination can spread quickly. Poor nutrition becomes common in low-income areas where fresh food is limited or too expensive, forcing families to rely on cheap, unhealthy processed foods that increase rates of diabetes, heart disease, and obesity. These health impacts show how food and environment are deeply connected, and how environmental harm often becomes a direct human health issue, especially for communities with the fewest resources to protect themselves. Economic costs also play a major role, because the food system creates financial burdens at every level of society. Industrial farming and factory farms generate pollution that requires expensive environmental cleanup, and the health problems caused by poor nutrition, chemical exposure, and contaminated air and water lead to higher healthcare costs for families and communities. Climate-driven disasters like droughts, floods, and heat waves reduce crop yields and damage farmland, creating climate-related economic losses that raise food prices worldwide. As basic foods become more expensive, households must spend a larger share of their income just to eat, and small farmers struggle to survive when the cost of seeds, fertilizers, and transportation increases. Low-income families face the hardest trade-offs because rising food prices force them to choose between paying for groceries, rent, medicine, or other essentials. These economic pressures show that the food system doesn't just affect the environment, it also shapes people's financial stability, deepens inequality, and makes it harder for vulnerable communities to access healthy food. Social impacts show how deeply the food system shapes people's lives and communities. Inequality grows when low-income neighborhoods cannot access healthy, affordable food and face higher rates of diet-related diseases. Food deserts limit fresh food options and force families to rely on fast food and processed items, which increases long-term health problems and keeps communities trapped in cycles of poor nutrition. Labor exploitation in farming, meatpacking, and food service harms workers through low wages, dangerous conditions, chemical exposure, and limited legal protections, showing how the food system depends on undervalued labor. Public health burdens rise as chronic illnesses like diabetes, heart disease, and obesity become more common, especially in marginalized communities that already face environmental stressors and limited access to healthcare. Rising food prices make it harder for families to afford nutritious meals, pushing them toward cheaper, less healthy options and increasing financial strain. Environmental injustice also plays a major role because communities of color and low-income neighborhoods are more likely to live near polluted farms, factory operations, or contaminated water sources, exposing them to higher levels of toxins and health risks. Altogether, these social impacts reveal that the food system is not just about what we eat. It shapes people's health, economic stability, and quality of life, especially for those with the fewest resources. As for group-level impacts, different groups experience the food system in very different ways, and these differences reveal how deeply inequality is built into the system. Low-income communities often face food deserts, where fresh and healthy food simply isn't available. Rural populations deal with long travel distances, limited grocery options, and pollution from nearby farms or factories. Farm workers face exploitation, unsafe working conditions, and chemical exposure. Indigenous communities lose access to traditional foods and land because of industrial agriculture and environmental damage. All of these experiences show how the food system reinforces inequality across society. Some examples will be families that face financial pressure from high grocery prices, medical bills, transportation costs, and rising rent in food desert areas. These pressures make it harder to stay healthy and stable. The food system affects both our wallets and our well-being. Housing and food access, which are closely connected, like low-income neighborhoods which often lack grocery stores, forcing families to rely on fast food or convenience stores. Communities near factory farms also face pollution, odors, and health risks. And places like rural areas, which struggle with unstable housing and limited food access. These issues deepen inequality and make it harder for families to thrive.
Individuals experience the food system through daily challenges like food access, chemical exposure, financial strain, and long-term health problems. These personal struggles show how our well-being is tied to the larger food system and the policies that shape it. For last, we got workers who faces some of the hardest conditions. Many earn low wages, work in unsafe environments, and deal with chemical exposure or seasonal instability. A large portion of these workers are migrants or undocumented, which increases their vulnerability to exploitation. Even though they are essential to feeding the country, they are often undervalued and underpaid.
And in all of that, also got people who are benefiting from the food system. Will be corporations, agribusiness, grocery chains, chemical and seed companies, investors, and fast food industries benefit the most from the food system. They profit from industrial farming, processed foods, and global supply chains. And for my final slide, before I end, I want to highlight the main message of my presentation. The food system affects every part of our lives, our health, our environment, our communities, and our future. Through this project, I learned how issues like industrial farming, food deserts, pollution, and corporate control are all connected. I also learned that solutions exist, but they require change at every level. Individuals making mindful choices, communities supporting local food systems, corporations adopting sustainable practices, and governments creating policies that protect both people and the planet. Understanding the food system helps us see that food is not just something we eat. It's a reflection of our values, our environment, and our society. Thank you.